I stood at the kitchen window of my ranch house, watching the morning sun spread across 2,000 acres of Texas prairie that had been in my family for 3 generations. The coffee in my hand was still hot, steam curling up past my face as I surveyed the land I had fought to keep after my husband died 7 years ago. This ranch was more than property. It was my history, my identity, the place where I had raised my daughter and buried my greatest love. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from my daughter Sophie. "Mom, can we come by this afternoon? Julian wants to talk to you about something important." I smiled, despite the unease that crept into my chest whenever my son-in-law's name appeared. Julian had married Sophie 3 years ago in a beautiful ceremony, under the oak trees near the south pasture. He had seemed perfect then, charming and attentive, with a family business in agricultural equipment that complemented our ranching life. But over the past year, something had shifted. I noticed the way he looked at my land with appraising eyes, the questions he asked about property values and water rights. I texted back that they should come for lunch, then set about preparing chicken enchiladas and Spanish rice. Cooking always steadied my nerves, and I needed steadiness today. They arrived just after noon, Julian's expensive truck kicking up dust on the drive. Sophie hugged me tightly, her blonde hair smelling of the lavender shampoo she had used since high school. She looked tired, I thought, with shadows under her green eyes that makeup could not quite hide. "Thanks for having us, Camilla," Julian said, his smile wide and white. He was handsome in that calculated way some men were, with perfectly styled dark hair and clothes that cost more than they should. He worked for his family's company, Harper Agricultural Supply, a business his grandfather had started 50 years ago. They sold tractors, irrigation systems, and farming equipment across 3 counties. We sat down to eat, and the conversation stayed light through the meal. Sophie told me about her new position at the veterinary clinic in town. Julian talked about expansion plans at Harper Agricultural. I listened, nodded, and watched. Finally, over coffee and pecan pie, Julian leaned forward with his elbows on the table. "Camilla, we wanted to discuss something with you. Something that could be really beneficial for everyone." I set down my fork. "I am listening." "You know how much we love this ranch," he began, glancing at Sophie, who smiled uncertainly. "But we have been thinking about your future, especially after that fall you had last month." The fall. I had slipped on wet tile in the bathroom and bruised my hip badly. Nothing serious, but it had frightened Sophie. I could see her fear now, written plainly on her face. "I am fine, sweetheart," I said to her directly. "It was just a stumble." "But Mom, you are out here alone," Sophie said, her voice tight with concern. "What if something worse happens? What if you break a bone and cannot get to a phone?" "Your daughter has a point," Julian added smoothly. "This place is remote. Beautiful, but remote. We have been looking at options that might give you more security while also setting up Sophie's future." My spine straightened. "What kind of options?" "There is a development company interested in this area," Julian said. "They are looking to build a resort community. Luxury homes, a golf course, amenities. They have made inquiries about several properties in this region, including yours." I kept my face neutral, but my heart began to pound. "I am not interested in selling." "Just hear us out," Julian said, that smile still in place. "The offer would be substantial, enough that you could buy a beautiful condo in town, somewhere safe and comfortable. Sophie would not have to worry about you anymore, and the money left over could secure both of your futures." Sophie reached across the table to touch my hand. "We are not trying to push you, Mom. We just want you to be safe and happy." I looked at my daughter, my only child, the girl I had raised to be strong and independent. She believed her husband's concern was genuine. She could not see what I saw, the gleam of opportunity in Julian's eyes that had nothing to do with my safety. "How much are they offering?" I asked quietly. Julian named a figure that would have impressed most people. It was generous by conventional standards, though nowhere near what the land was actually worth, especially if development was coming to the area. "I will think about it," I said, which was the safest answer I could give without revealing my hand. Julian's smile widened. "That is all we are asking. Just consider it. We can bring you the detailed proposal next week." After they left, I stood again at my kitchen window, looking out at the land that held my entire history. I thought about my late husband, Roberto, who had worked himself to exhaustion to keep this ranch profitable. I thought about my father and grandfather before him, all the generations who had poured sweat and blood into this Texas soil. Then I thought about something Julian did not know, something almost no one knew. 6 months ago, I had made an acquisition. A quiet, carefully structured purchase through a web of legal entities and investment firms. It had taken most of my liquid assets and some creative financing, but I had managed it. I owned 60% of Harper Agricultural Supply, Julian's family business. His grandfather, facing health problems and financial pressure, had sold controlling interest to what he believed was an investment consortium. He had no idea that behind that consortium was the mother-in-law of his grandson. I had my reasons for the purchase, reasons that went beyond simple investment strategy. I had heard rumors about the Harper family, about business practices that skirted legal boundaries, about debts and obligations that never appeared on official balance sheets. The next morning, I drove into town to meet with my attorney, Grace, who had helped structure the acquisition of Harper Agricultural. Her office sat above the bank on Main Street, a modest space that belied her sharp legal mind. "I think it is starting," I told her after the pleasantries were done. "Julian is pushing for me to sell the ranch." Grace leaned back in her leather chair, her silver hair caught in a neat bun. She was 10 years older than me and had been practicing law in this county for 4 decades. She knew everyone's business, sometimes before they knew it themselves. "Did he mention the development company by name?" she asked. "No, he kept it vague, but he will. I think he wants to soften me up first, make me believe this is about my welfare." Grace pulled a folder from her desk drawer. "You should see this. I have been doing some digging since you told me about Julian's questions last month." She slid several documents across the desk. They were property records, LLC filings, and financial disclosures. As I read through them, a picture emerged that confirmed my suspicions. Julian was involved with the development company, not just as a bystander, but as a silent partner. He stood to make a significant commission if my ranch sold, and even more if he could convince me to accept a below-market price. "There is more," Grace said. "The development company has been acquiring land in this area for 18 months. They have bought 6 properties already, all from elderly owners, all at prices well below market value. There is a pattern of pressure tactics, manufactured urgency, sometimes even implied threats about property taxes or zoning changes." My hands tightened on the papers. "How is this legal?" "It walks a fine line. Nothing overtly criminal, just deeply unethical. They find vulnerable people and exploit their fears." Grace paused. "They clearly see you as vulnerable, Camilla. A widow alone on a big property." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They have made a mistake." "Yes, they have." Grace smiled slightly. "What do you want to do?" "I want to watch," I said. "I want to see how far Julian will go. And then I want to use what I know about Harper Agricultural to make sure he understands exactly who he tried to manipulate." Grace nodded slowly. "The business is yours to do with as you wish. You have controlling interest and full legal authority. But Camilla, think carefully about this. Sophie will be caught in the middle." That stopped me. My daughter. My sweet, trusting daughter who had no idea her husband was a predator. "I know," I said quietly. "But she needs to know the truth about the man she married. Better she learns it now than 10 years from now when he has had more time to do damage." Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role of a woman wavering. I let Julian bring me the detailed proposal from the development company. I attended a meeting with their representatives, slick men in expensive suits who talked about my comfort and security while their eyes calculated profit margins. I asked questions that made me seem concerned, but tempted. Julian grew more confident with each interaction. He began talking about the condo he had found for me, a nice place near the grocery store and the doctor's office. He brought Sophie along to these discussions, using her genuine worry about me as a weapon to break down my resistance. "Mom, I just want to know you are okay," Sophie said one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. Julian had gone inside to take a phone call. "This place is so isolated. What if something happens?" "Do you want me to sell?" I asked her directly. She hesitated, then sighed. "I want you to be safe. Julian says the development will happen whether you sell or not. And if you wait too long, the offer might decrease." "Julian says a lot of things," I replied, keeping my voice gentle. "Tell me something, sweetheart. Are you happy with him?" The question clearly surprised her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is he good to you? Is your marriage what you hoped it would be?" Sophie looked away, toward the darkening horizon. "He works a lot. He is under a lot of pressure with the business." That was not an answer, not really. But before I could press further, Julian returned, his phone in hand and that smile back on his face. "Good news," he announced. "The development company is willing to increase their offer by 5% if you make a decision within the next 30 days. They want to move forward with the project, and your property is the key piece." I nodded slowly, as if considering this. "That is generous." "It is more than generous," Julian said. "Camilla, opportunities like this do not come along often. Especially at your age, you need to think about security." "At my age." The condescension was barely veiled. "I will give you my answer soon," I said. "But I need to handle something else first. I have to go into the city for a medical procedure. My doctor found something during my last checkup." Sophie's face went pale. "What? Mom? What is it?" "Nothing serious," I lied smoothly. "A minor procedure, but they want to keep me for observation for a week afterward. I am leaving this Friday." This was the bait I was setting. I was not actually having any procedure. Instead, I would be in Houston meeting with the Harper Agricultural Board of Directors and key stakeholders, preparing to exercise my authority as majority shareholder. But Julian did not need to know that yet. "A week?" Julian asked, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Will you need someone to watch the place?" "The foreman and the ranch hands will handle everything," I said. "I have already arranged it." I left for Houston on Friday morning, making sure Sophie saw me go. I hugged her tightly at my truck, told her not to worry, and promised to call every day. "I love you, Mom," she said, holding on longer than usual. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you know." The drive to Houston took 6 hours. I checked into a hotel near the Galleria and immediately began making calls. Grace had prepared everything I needed, documentation that proved my ownership of Harper Agricultural and legal authority to make executive decisions. On Monday morning, I sat in a conference room with the company's CFO, operations manager, and the family attorney who had handled the original sale to my investment consortium. They were nervous, clearly unsure why the mysterious majority shareholder had suddenly called this meeting. I introduced myself properly for the first time, watching their faces register shock as they realized the quiet widow from the ranch was actually their boss. "I need a complete audit of the company's finances," I began. "Every account, every transaction for the past 3 years. I also need detailed information about any side businesses or ventures that family members are involved in, particularly Julian." The CFO, a thin man named Walter with nervous hands, cleared his throat. "May I ask why?" "Because I believe there are improprieties that need to be addressed," I said calmly. "And because as majority shareholder, I have the right and responsibility to ensure this company operates with integrity." Over the next 4 days, I reviewed documents that confirmed what I had suspected. Julian had been using his position at Harper Agricultural for personal gain in ways that violated company policy and potentially securities law. He had been steering clients toward the development company, receiving kickbacks that he never disclosed. He had been inflating equipment prices and pocketing the difference. He had been systematically looting the business his grandfather had built. But the most damning discovery came on Thursday afternoon, when Walter brought me a file he had been reluctant to share. "This is delicate," he said quietly. "It involves your daughter." My stomach tightened as I opened the file. Inside were loan documents, property deeds, and financial statements. Julian had taken out loans against Harper Agricultural assets without proper authorization, using forged signatures from his grandfather. He had used some of that money to finance his lifestyle, but a significant portion had gone toward options and deposits on land surrounding my ranch. He had been planning this for over a year, positioning himself to profit massively from the development, and in several documents, he had forged Sophie's signature, making her appear complicit in his schemes. I felt rage rise in me like a physical force. He had not only targeted me, but he had put my daughter at legal risk to serve his greed. "Walter," I said, my voice cold and steady, "I need you to prepare documentation for a full corporate restructuring. Julian is to be terminated immediately, effective today. All his accounts are to be frozen, and all access to company systems revoked. And I need you to contact the district attorney's office. I believe we have evidence of fraud that needs to be reported." Walter nodded, relief evident on his face. "I have been waiting for someone to address this. Julian has been out of control for months, but his grandfather would not hear any criticism." "His grandfather does not run this company anymore," I said. "I do." That afternoon, while I was still in Houston, my phone rang. It was Sophie, her voice high with panic. "Mom, something crazy is happening. Julian just got a call from his office. They are saying he has been fired, that there is some kind of investigation. He is furious. He is saying it is a mistake, that someone is sabotaging him." I took a deep breath. "Where are you right now?" "At home. Julian is throwing things, Mom. He is scaring me." "Listen to me carefully," I said. "I want you to pack a bag and drive to your friend Hannah's house. Do it now while he is distracted." "Can you do that?" "What? Why? Mom, what is going on?" "I will explain everything when I get home tomorrow, but right now I need you to trust me and leave that house. Please, Sophie." She was silent for a moment, then said, Okay, I will go." After we hung up, I called Grace. "Julian has been fired from Harper Agricultural. Sophie is leaving their house now. I need you to prepare papers. Restraining order if necessary, and I want to make sure Sophie is legally protected from any of his business dealings." "Already on it," Grace said. "Camilla, you should know that Julian has been making calls. He has been trying to reach you." "Let him try," I said. "He will get his answer soon enough." That night, from my hotel room, I received a series of increasingly frantic messages from Julian. They started with confusion, progressed to anger, and finally descended into threats. "You did this somehow," one message read. "I do not know how, but I will figure it out. You are going to regret interfering in my business." Another said, "Sophie and I are coming to your ranch tomorrow. We need to talk about the sale. This needs to happen now." I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded all the messages to Grace and to the investigator the district attorney's office had assigned to Julian's case. On Friday morning, I checked out of the hotel and began the drive back home. The Texas landscape rolled past my windows, flat and endless and beautiful. I thought about what was waiting for me, the confrontation that was inevitable now. Julian thought he was coming to my ranch to pressure a vulnerable old woman into selling her property. What he did not know was that I had dismantled his entire life in the span of a week. His job was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His illegal schemes were now under criminal investigation, and the woman he had tried to manipulate owned the business that bore his family name. I arrived home late Friday afternoon, pulling up to my ranch house just as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The place looked exactly as I had left it, peaceful and unchanging. But I knew that peace was about to shatter. My foreman, Diego, was waiting on the porch. He was a sturdy man in his 60s, who had worked for my family for 30 years. He stood when he saw my truck, his weathered face troubled. "Miss Camila," he said as I climbed the steps, "we have had some visitors while you were gone." "Julian?" "Him and some other men. They came 3 days ago, Wednesday afternoon. Had surveying equipment, were walking your property taking measurements and photographs." My jaw tightened. "Did you stop them?" "I told them they were trespassing and needed to leave. Julian said he had your permission, that you had agreed to sell, and the survey was part of the process. I told him I had heard nothing from you about any sale, but he insisted." Diego's expression darkened. One of the other men, older fellow in an expensive suit, told me that my job would be eliminated soon anyway. Said the development company would not need ranch staff. "They threatened you?" "Yes, ma'am. I called the sheriff's department, but by the time Deputy Harris arrived, they were leaving. Julian told the deputy it was all a misunderstanding, that family business had gotten confused." I placed my hand on Diego's shoulder. "Thank you for protecting my property. I promise you, there will be no sale and no development. Your job is secure." Relief flooded his features. "What is happening, Miss Camilla? That boy has never acted right, but this is something else." "Yes," I agreed. "It is something else entirely. And it ends today." I went inside and found my house exactly as I had left it, nothing disturbed. But knowing Julian had been here, walking my land with surveyors and developers, treating my property as if it were already his, ignited a fury I could barely contain. I called Grace. "He trespassed. He brought surveyors onto my property without permission." "I know," Grace said. "Diego called me after he called the sheriff. I have been documenting everything. Camilla, the district attorney is moving fast on this. They found enough evidence in the Harper agricultural records to charge Julian with fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. A warrant for his arrest will be issued Monday morning." "Does he know?" "Not yet. The DA wants to move carefully because of the family connections. The Harpers are well known in this county." "Not as well known as they think," I said. "Grace, I want to confront him. I want him to come here and face what he has done. That might not be wise. Maybe not, but it is necessary. For Sophie's sake, if nothing else. She needs to see who he really is, and it needs to happen before he is arrested. Otherwise, he will spin this as persecution, make himself the victim." Grace was quiet for a moment. "If you are determined to do this, at least have the sheriff present, and let me be there too." "Agreed. Can you arrange it for tomorrow? I will invite Julian here under the pretense of finally giving him my answer about the ranch." After we finalized the plan, I called Sophie. She answered on the first ring, her voice strained. "Mom, thank God. Are you okay? Julian has been frantic trying to reach you." "I am home now, sweetheart. Can you and Julian come to the ranch tomorrow morning? I have made my decision about the sale, and I want to discuss it with both of you." "Really? Oh, Mom, that is great. Julian will be so relieved. He has been under so much stress this week." The irony of her words cut deep. "I can imagine. Tell him to be here at 10 in the morning." "We will be there. And Mom, thank you for considering this. I know it is a big change, but I really think it is for the best." I closed my eyes, hating that my daughter had been deceived so thoroughly. "We will see, sweetheart. We will see." That night, I barely slept. I walked through my house in the darkness, touching the furniture my grandparents had made, looking at photographs of my family spanning generations. This was not just a house or a piece of land. It was the physical embodiment of my history, my identity, my legacy. And Julian had tried to take it from me through manipulation and lies. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. I dressed carefully, choosing jeans and a denim shirt, ranch clothes that reminded me who I was. I made coffee and waited. Sheriff Thompson arrived first, parking his cruiser near the barn where it would not be immediately visible. He was a tall black man in his 50s who had known my husband well. He understood what was at stake. "This is an unusual request, Camilla," he said as we stood in my kitchen. "But given what Grace told me about the investigation, I understand why you want witnesses." "I need Sophie to hear the truth from Julian's own mouth," I said. "She will not believe it otherwise. She loves him, trusts him. This is going to destroy her." "Sometimes destruction is necessary for rebuilding," the sheriff said quietly. Grace arrived 20 minutes later, parking near the sheriff's cruiser. She carried a briefcase full of documents, evidence of Julian's crimes and my ownership of Harper Agricultural. At exactly 10 in the morning, Julian's truck came up the drive. I watched from the window as he parked, noting the tension in his movements. He looked like a man barely holding himself together. Sophie emerged from the passenger side, smiling nervously. I met them at the door, hugging Sophie and nodding coolly at Julian. "Come in," I said. "I have coffee made." We settled in the living room, Sophie on the couch beside Julian, me in my father's old leather chair. Julian was trying to project confidence, but I could see the cracks. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight. "Thank you for seeing us, Camilla," he began. "I know this week has been difficult for you with the medical issues and everything. How did the procedure go?" "There was no procedure," I said calmly. "I lied about that." Sophie blinked in confusion. "What? Why would you lie?" "Because I wanted to see what would happen if I left the ranch unattended. I wanted to know how far certain people would go when they thought I was vulnerable and distracted." Julian's expression shifted, wariness creeping into his eyes. "I do not understand." "Yes, you do." I leaned forward. "You came onto my property while I was gone. You brought surveyors. You walked my land as if you already owned it, measuring and photographing, planning how to divide it up for your development partners." Sophie turned to Julian, her face pale. "Is that true?" "It was just preliminary work," Julian said quickly. "We were trying to help move the process along so that when you decided to sell, everything would be ready. We were doing you a favor, Camilla. A favor." I let the word hang in the air. "The same way you were doing me a favor by arranging a sale price well below market value? The same way you were doing Sophie a favor by forging her signature on loan documents?" The room went silent. Sophie stared at Julian, shock dawning on her face. What is she talking about? Julian stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I do not have to listen to these accusations." "Sit down," I said, my voice sharp as a whip. "You are going to listen to every word." Sheriff Thompson chose that moment to walk in from the kitchen, his uniform and badge making Julian freeze. "I think you should sit, son," the sheriff said mildly. Julian sat, his face now flushed with anger and fear. Sophie looked between us, her hands trembling. "Mom, please explain what is happening." I took a breath, making sure to look at my daughter as I spoke. 6 months ago, I bought controlling interest in Harper Agricultural Supply, 60% of the company. I am the majority shareholder, which means I own Julian's family business. Sophie's mouth fell open. Julian made a strangled sound. "That is impossible," he said. "The company was sold to an investment consortium." "That I created," I said, "through legal entities and careful structuring. Your grandfather had no idea he was selling to me." "Why?" Sophie whispered. "Why would you do that?" "Because I heard rumors about the business. about questionable practices and financial instability. I wanted to protect my investment and my daughter's future. What I found was worse than I imagined. I nodded to Grace, who opened her briefcase and pulled out documents. Julian has been stealing from Harper Agricultural for at least 18 months, Grace said, her voice clinical and precise. He has been accepting kickbacks from the development company, embezzling funds through falsified invoices, and most seriously, he has been forging signatures to take out unauthorized loans. That is a lie, Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Grace slid papers across the coffee table. These are loan documents with your grandfather's signature. The signature has been analyzed by a forensic expert and deemed fraudulent. These other documents have Sophie's signature, also forged. You made your wife an unwitting accessory to your crimes. Sophie picked up one of the documents with shaking hands. Tears began streaming down her face as she recognized what she was looking at. You forged my name? You made it look like I was involved in this? I was going to tell you, Julian said desperately. It was just temporary, just to get us through a rough patch. The development deal would have made it all right. We would have had so much money, Sophie. Enough to pay everything back and more. Enough from selling my mother's ranch, Sophie said, her voice breaking. You were using me to pressure her into selling so you could profit and cover up your crimes. It was not like that, Julian insisted, reaching for her hand. She jerked away from him. It was exactly like that, I said. You saw an opportunity in my age and my widowhood. You thought I would be easy to manipulate, that I would believe your concern for my welfare was genuine. You thought you could pressure me through Sophie, use her love for me as a weapon. Julian's face twisted with anger. You think you are so smart, Dunn, not you. You think you have won, but you have destroyed your daughter's marriage. You have humiliated her. Everyone will know her husband was a thief because you could not just accept a generous offer and move on. Everyone will know her husband is a thief because he is a thief, I said coldly. I did not forge those documents. I did not steal that money. I did not trespass on private property or attempt to defraud an elderly woman. You did all of that yourself. Sophie was crying openly now, her hands covering her face. I wanted to go to her, to hold her, but this was not finished yet. There is more, Grace said. She pulled out another file. Julian has been working with the development company for nearly 2 years. He was never just a passive supporter of the sale. He is a silent partner, positioned to make substantial commissions and profits. He stands to gain over $2 million if the development proceeds. $2 million, Sophie repeated, her voice hollow. That is why he was so insistent, I said. That is why he brought surveyors onto my property without permission. He is desperate because his other schemes are falling apart, and he needs this deal to save himself. Julian stood again, this time moving toward the door. Sheriff Thompson blocked his path. Where do you think you are going? The sheriff asked. I do not have to stay here and be attacked, Julian snarled. This is harassment. You have no right to keep me here. Actually, I do, I said. This is my property and you are trespassing. Sheriff Thompson, I want to press charges for the trespass earlier this week. Consider it done, the sheriff said. He pulled out his handcuffs. Julian, I also need to inform you that there is a warrant being prepared for your arrest on charges of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. It will be issued Monday morning. You are not under arrest at this moment, but I strongly advise you to contact an attorney. The color drained from Julian's face. He looked at Sophie, at me, at the sheriff, as if trying to find a way out. There was none. Sophie, he said, his voice cracking, you have to believe me. I did this for us. I did it so we could have a good life. Sophie stood, wiping her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears. You did it for yourself. You used me. You used my mother. And you destroyed your own family's business with your greed. She turned to me. Mom, I am so sorry. I did not know. I should have seen it, but I did not want to believe he could be like this. I went to her then, pulling her into my arms. You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. This is not your fault. Julian watched us, and I saw the moment he realized he had lost everything. His wife, his job, his reputation, his freedom. All of it gone because of his own choices. This is not over, he said, but the threat was empty. Yes, I said quietly. It is. Sheriff Thompson escorted Julian out, leaving instructions for him to remain in the county and available for questioning. Grace packed up her documents, promising to help Sophie with whatever legal proceedings would follow. After everyone left, Sophie and I sat on the porch watching the afternoon sun paint the prairie in shades of gold. She had cried herself out and now sat in silence, processing everything that had been revealed. How long have you known? She finally asked. About the extent of it? Only this week, when I reviewed the Harper agricultural records. But I suspected something was wrong for months. The way he looked at the ranch, the questions he asked. It did not feel like concern for my welfare. It felt like assessment, like he was calculating value. Sophie nodded slowly. I told myself I was imagining things. He was working so much, seemed so stressed. I thought I was being paranoid or unsupportive. He is skilled at manipulation, I said gently. That is not a reflection on you. But I am his wife. I should have seen it. She turned to look at me, her eyes red and swollen. How did you know to buy the company? What made you think of that? I chose my words carefully. Your father taught me that the best way to understand someone is to understand what they value. Julian valued the family business, his position in it, the respect it gave him. I wanted to look deeper into that business because I suspected if there were problems in his character, they would show up there. What I found was worse than I imagined, but it also gave me leverage to protect both of us. You protected me, Sophie said. Even though I was pushing you to sell, believing his lies, you were protecting me the whole time. That is what mothers do. She was quiet for a long moment, then asked, What happens now? To the business? To Julian? To all of it? Julian will be arrested on Monday. He will face criminal charges for what he has done. As for Harper Agricultural, I will work with the board to stabilize the company and restore integrity to its operations. Your grandfather built something good, and I will not let Julian's crimes destroy it. And the ranch? I smiled, the first genuine smile in days. The ranch stays exactly as it is. This land is not for sale, not now and not ever. It will be yours someday, Sophie, when I am actually too old to manage it. But that day is not today. Sophie leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder the way she had when she was a little girl. I am going to need to file for divorce. Yes. It is going to be ugly. Yes. But it is necessary. Yes. We sat like that until the sun touched the horizon, mother and daughter, watching the land that had held our family for 3 generations. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and proceedings, and all the mess of unraveling a marriage built on lies. But today, we just sat together. Over the following weeks, everything I had predicted came to pass. Julian was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and forgery. The evidence was overwhelming, including the forged signatures, the unauthorized loans, and the kickback scheme with the development company. He tried to make a deal with the prosecutors, offering information about the development company's questionable practices in exchange for reduced charges. It did not help him much. The Harper family was devastated. Julian's grandfather, already in poor health, took the news hard. His mother called me once, crying and begging me to drop the charges against her son. I listened to her pain and felt compassion for it, but I did not waver. Your son made choices that harmed people, I told her. He forged documents, stole money, and tried to defraud my family. I did not create these consequences. He did. Sophie filed for divorce 3 weeks after the confrontation. Julian contested it at first, trying to claim reconciliation was possible, but his attorney eventually convinced him that fighting would only make things worse for him legally. The divorce was finalized in 8 months, quick by Texas standards, but still agonizing for Sophie. She moved back to the ranch during that time, occupying her childhood bedroom while she rebuilt her life. I watched her grief and supported her through it, but I also watched her grow stronger. She threw herself into work at the veterinary clinic, began taking riding lessons again, and slowly rediscovered who she was outside of her marriage. One evening in late autumn, we rode horses out to the south pasture where the old oak trees grew. The air had turned cool, a relief after the brutal summer heat. We dismounted and sat beneath the largest oak, the same tree where Sophie had married Julian 3.5 years earlier. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Buying the company, exposing him, all of it? It would have been easier to just sell the ranch and move on." "Easier for whom?" I asked. "Not for you, not in the long run. Julian would have continued his pattern of manipulation and crime. You would have been tied to him, possibly implicated in his schemes, and I would have lost the land that holds everything I love. But you could have just refused to sell. You did not have to go to war with him." I considered this. Maybe not. "But Sophie, he trespassed on my property. He forged your signature. He tried to use your love for me as a tool to pressure me into a decision that benefited only him. That required a response, not just a refusal." She nodded, pulling at the grass near her boots. "I used to be angry with you in those first few weeks. I thought you had destroyed my marriage." "I know. But you did not destroy it. It was never real. He never loved me, not really. I was just useful to him." "That is not true," I said firmly. "Julian is capable of love, just in a limited, selfish way. He loved what you represented, how you made him look, the access you gave him. That is not the same as loving who you are, but it is not nothing either." Sophie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "How do you get past it? How do you trust anyone again?" "Slowly," I said, "carefully. But you do. Because the alternative is letting his betrayal poison the rest of your life, and he does not deserve that power." We rode back to the house as dusk fell, the prairie turning purple and gold around us. Inside, I made dinner while Sophie set the table, falling into comfortable routines that felt like healing. That night, after Sophie went to bed, I stood at my kitchen window one more time, looking out at the land I had fought to keep. I thought about Julian and his arrogance, how he had assumed my age and widowhood made me weak. He had learned otherwise, though the lesson had cost him everything. The trial began in early spring, nearly 6 months after Julian's arrest. The courthouse in the county seat was an old stone building with columns and tall windows, a structure that had witnessed justice for over 100 years. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Grace beside me. Sophie stayed away, unable to face watching her ex-husband in court. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They presented the forged loan documents with expert testimony about the signature analysis. They showed the financial records from Harper Agricultural that proved embezzlement. They brought in witnesses from the development company who testified about the kickback arrangement, though several of them had been granted immunity in exchange for their cooperation. Julian's defense attorney tried to paint him as a young man under pressure, someone who had made mistakes but had not intended real harm. It was a weak strategy given the evidence, and the jury saw through it. They deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. I watched Julian's face as the verdict was read. He stood between his attorneys, his expensive suit unable to hide the weight he had lost, or the hollow look in his eyes. When the foreman said guilty for the 3rd time, Julian's knees buckled slightly. His mother sobbed in the row behind him. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, A stern woman in her 60s who had no patience for white-collar crime, gave Julian 8 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he might serve 6. His attorney asked for leniency, citing his youth and his family's standing in the community. The judge responded by noting that those same advantages made his crimes more egregious, not less. He had been given every opportunity and had chosen to squander them through greed and entitlement. As they led Julian away in handcuffs, he looked back at the gallery. His eyes found mine, and in that moment, I saw something I had not expected. Understanding. He knew, finally, that he had underestimated me catastrophically. He had thought me easy prey, and had discovered instead that I was his destruction. After the sentencing, I drove back to the ranch alone. Grace had offered to come with me, but I needed the solitude of the drive, the long empty roads and wide sky. I needed to process what I felt, which was not triumph, but something more complicated. Satisfaction mixed with sadness. Justice mixed with the bitter taste of family betrayal. Sophie was waiting when I got home, sitting on the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. She had been following the trial through news reports but had asked me not to give her details. "Is it over?" she asked as I climbed the steps. "Yes, 8 years." She nodded, taking this in. "Do you feel better, now that he has been punished?" "I feel like justice was served," I said carefully. "That is not the same as feeling better." We drank our tea in silence, watching the sun move across the sky. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. "I have been thinking," Sophie said eventually, "about what I want to do. With my life, I mean. Who I want to be now. And I want to stay here, on the ranch. I want to learn how to really run it, not just visit on weekends. I want to understand the business, the land management, all of it." She looked at me. "If you will teach me." Something warm expanded in my chest. I would like nothing more. "I know I was not interested before," she continued. "When Dad was alive, I thought ranching was boring. I wanted to get away, see the world, do something different. But now I understand what this place means. It is not just land, it is legacy." "Yes," I agreed. "It is exactly that." We spent the rest of that afternoon walking the property, discussing water rights and grazing rotation and fence maintenance. Sophie asked questions and listened intently, her mind sharp and engaged. I saw my father in her then, and my grandfather, the same practical intelligence that had kept this ranch viable through droughts and depressions and changing times. As for Harper Agricultural, I installed new management and implemented strict oversight procedures. Walter, the CFO who had helped expose Julian's crimes, was promoted to Chief Operating Officer. Together, we worked to restore the company's reputation and rebuild relationships with clients who had been burned by Julian's schemes. The business survived, though it took 2 years to fully recover. We paid back the improperly obtained loans, compensated clients who had been overcharged, and established an ethics program that became a model for other agricultural supply companies in the region. Julian's grandfather passed away 8 months after the sentencing, his health broken by the scandal and shame. I attended the funeral, sitting in the back row out of respect for the business he had built and the innocent members of his family. Julian's mother saw me there and came to speak with me afterward. "I do not forgive you," she said, her voice low and strained. "You destroyed my son." "No," I replied gently but firmly. "Your son destroyed himself. I simply made sure he faced consequences for his actions." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I understood her anger and her grief, but I did not regret my choices. Julian had tried to victimize me and had implicated my daughter in his crimes. The fact that he faced justice for that was not cruelty on my part. It was necessity. The seasons turned, and the ranch continued its rhythms. Sophie proved to be a natural rancher, combining her veterinary knowledge with an instinct for land management that impressed Diego and the other hands. She worked 12-hour days without complaint, learning to fix fences and manage cattle and operate heavy equipment. On her 29th birthday, 2 years after Julian's conviction, I took her to the lawyer's office in town. Grace had prepared documents that officially made Sophie a co-owner of the ranch, giving her 50% interest in the property and the business. "Mom, are you sure?" Sophie asked, staring at the papers. "This is everything. This is your whole life." "It was my whole life," I said. "Now, it is our life. You have earned this, Sophie. You have proven yourself 100 times over." She signed the papers with tears in her eyes, and then we went to the diner on Main Street to celebrate with chicken fried steak and pie. It was a simple celebration, but it felt right, appropriate to who we were and what we valued. The development company that Julian had been working with eventually abandoned their plans for the area. Without my ranch as the anchor property, their project was not viable. The other landowners they had pressured into selling sued them for fraud, and the company dissolved in a mess of litigation and bankruptcy. Justice, I thought, had a way of catching up with people. I kept my ownership of Harper Agricultural for 5 years total, long enough to ensure the company was stable and ethical again. Then I sold my shares to Walter and a consortium of longtime employees, taking a modest profit, but mostly satisfied that the business was in good hands. The Harper name remained on the company, honoring the grandfather who had built it, but the family itself no longer controlled it. Sophie eventually began dating again, cautiously at first, and then with more confidence. She met a veterinarian from a neighboring county, a quiet man named Isaac, who loved animals and had no interest in land development or get-rich-quick schemes. They dated for 3 years before getting engaged, taking their time to build something solid. I liked Isaac. He was humble and hard-working, and most importantly, he treated Sophie as an equal partner. When he asked for my blessing to marry her, I gave it readily. "Just so you know," I told him with a slight smile, "this family has a history of eating men alive when they try to take advantage of us." Isaac laughed nervously. "Sophie told me about Julian. I promise you, I am nothing like him." "I know," I said. "That is why I am giving you my blessing." They married on the ranch, but not under the oak trees in the south pasture. Sophie chose a different location, a clearing near the creek where wildflowers grew thick in spring. She wanted to make new memories, she said, not be haunted by old ones. As I watched her marry Isaac, surrounded by friends and genuine love, I felt the last piece of my anger at Julian finally release. He had taken years from Sophie's life, but he had not broken her. She had survived him and become stronger, more cautious, but also more confident in her own judgment. Julian wrote to Sophie once from prison, a long letter that apparently tried to explain himself and ask for forgiveness. She showed it to me, asking what I thought she should do. "That depends," I said. "What do you want?" "I want to feel nothing when I think about him," Sophie admitted, "but I still feel angry. Is that wrong?" "No. Anger is healthy when it is proportionate to the harm done. He tried to use you, to implicate you in crimes, to steal your mother's land through manipulation. You have a right to be angry about that. But do I have to forgive him to move on?" I thought about this carefully. Forgiveness is not the same as healing. You can heal without forgiving him. You can build a wonderful life without giving him absolution. If forgiveness comes, let it come naturally, not because you think you owe it to him. Sophie burned the letter that afternoon, watching the pages curl and blacken in the fireplace. She never responded to Julian, never visited him in prison, never gave him the closure he sought. It was her choice, and I supported it completely. The ranch prospered under our joint management. We expanded operations, added new breeding stock, and implemented sustainable practices that improved both our bottom line and our environmental impact. Sophie wrote articles about ranch management for agricultural journals, building a reputation as an expert in her field. I watched her thrive and felt my own role slowly shift from owner-operator to advisor and mentor. My body reminded me more frequently that I was aging, but my mind stayed sharp, and I enjoyed the gradual transition of responsibility to the next generation. On the 5th anniversary of Julian's conviction, I received a letter from him. Unlike the one he had sent Sophie, this one was short and direct. "You won," it said simply. "I understand that now. I thought I was clever, but you were always 3 steps ahead. I hope you are satisfied." I did not respond to his letter either. Satisfaction was not what I felt. I felt vindicated, certainly. I felt justice had been served. But satisfaction suggested a joy in his downfall that I did not actually experience. What I felt was relief that my daughter was safe, that my land was secure, that a man who hurt people had been stopped. Years continued to pass in the way years do on a ranch, marked by seasons and cattle sales and the endless work of maintaining land. Sophie had a daughter, my granddaughter, whom she named Rosa after my mother. Holding that baby in my arms for the first time, I felt the continuity of generations, the unbroken line from my grandfather to this small new person who would someday inherit the land we had all fought to preserve. Julian was released after serving 6 years of his sentence. I heard about it through Grace, who still kept track of such things. He left Texas immediately, moving to Oregon to live with a cousin. His mother had passed away while he was in prison, and his father wanted nothing to do with him. The Harper family had closed ranks against him, unwilling to be associated with his crimes. I wondered occasionally what his life was like now, whether he had learned anything or simply felt sorry for himself. Then I decided it did not matter. He was no longer my concern, no longer anyone's concern in our county. He had become irrelevant, which was perhaps the greatest punishment of all for someone who had craved significance. Sophie never asked about him, and I took my cue from her. Some chapters close completely, and there is no need to keep revisiting them. On my 60th birthday, Sophie threw a party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighboring ranchers and everyone who had been part of our lives. It was a beautiful evening, warm but not oppressive, with a breeze that carried the scent of prairie grass and distant rain. Diego, now in his 70s but still working part-time, gave a toast that made me cry. He talked about my husband, about the hard years after his death when I could have sold out but chose to fight instead. He talked about my strength and my wisdom, about how I had protected not just land, but a way of life. "Miss Camilla taught us all something important," Diego said, raising his glass. "She taught us that real power is not about money or manipulation. It is about knowing who you are and refusing to be moved from that position." The men who tried to push her found that out the hard way. Everyone laughed and applauded. I looked around at the faces of people I loved, people who had stood by me through everything, and felt genuinely happy. Later, as the party wound down, Sophie and I stood together near the barn, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Little Rosa was asleep in Isaac's arms, her face peaceful and perfect. "Do you think she will want the ranch someday?" Sophie asked, nodding toward her daughter. "Or will she do what I did and run away from it for a while?" "I think she will make her own choice, whatever that is," I said. "And we will support her." "But Sophie, you did not run away. You took the time to figure out who you were, and then you came home. That is not weakness. That is strength." Sophie smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "I am glad I came home." "So am I." We stood in comfortable silence, 3 generations of women bound to this land in different ways. I thought about Julian one last time, about how he had seen my age and my widowhood as vulnerabilities to exploit. He had never understood that those same qualities were my greatest strengths. I knew who I was. I knew what mattered. And I was willing to fight for it without mercy or hesitation. The revenge I had taken on Julian was not about cruelty or spite. It was about protection and justice. He had threatened my family and my legacy, and I had responded with overwhelming force, using weapons he never knew I possessed. I had bought his family business, exposed his crimes, ensured he faced full legal consequences, and removed him completely from our lives. And in doing so, I had taught my daughter something vital: that women do not have to accept being victimized, that age is not weakness, that the appearance of vulnerability can be a strategic choice rather than a limitation. Julian never recovered from his fall. After his release from prison, he worked a series of menial jobs, unable to leverage his education or connections due to his criminal record. His divorce from Sophie cost him what little money he had managed to hide. The development company he had worked with sued him for damages, claiming he had misrepresented his ability to deliver my ranch. He declared bankruptcy twice. His father died without reconciling with him, leaving him nothing in the will. The Harper family business thrived under new management, specifically excluding him from any benefit or association. He was 40 years old and essentially homeless, living in a cousin's garage, working night shifts at a warehouse, and facing the reality that his greed and arrogance had destroyed every opportunity he had ever been given. Sophie built a life of genuine happiness, free from manipulation and deceit, proving that sometimes the best revenge is not just destroying your enemy, but thriving so completely that they become irrelevant to your joy. And I, standing at my kitchen window on a Tuesday morning in my 61st year, watching the sun rise over land my family had held for generations, felt at peace with every choice I had made on my journey through betrayal to justice.